The glistening cities of the Gulf have long attracted investors and millions of foreign workers looking for opportunity. But the honeymoon era of booming growth and jobs for all is coming to an end. Oil profits have accounted for more than 80% of GCC government revenues, but a fall in prices have hit Gulf economies hard. GCC countries are now championing radical new drives to slash public spending, like raising taxes, cutting subsidies, and getting their own people back to work. For Saudi Arabia, unemployment has been an issue. Out of Saudi's 11.5 million workers, 5 million are Saudi nationals, while 6.5 million are foreign workers. According to the Saudi General Authority for Statistics, 647,000 Saudis were unemployed last year. So, in theory, replacing just 10% of expat jobs with local ones would solve the local jobless problem. In March, Saudi Arabia offered a 90-day amnesty for illegal workers to leave the country voluntarily. The move has forced countries like Ghana and Ethiopia to issue emergency travel documents for their overseas workers, but mass deportations are ongoing. Countries like Oman have also been deporting tens of thousands of workers who've ditched their jobs to join an underground labor force. The GCC may be trying to clean up its economy, but will it risk sparking a forced exodus of people desperate to hang on to opportunity?
Well, joining me now from New Jersey is Bernard Hakel. He's a professor of Near Eastern Studies at Princeton University. He has written extensively on Saudi Arabian politics and culture. And from Manama, Omar Al-Obaidli, he's the program director for international and geopolitical studies at the Bahrain Center for Strategic, International and Energy Studies. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us. Omar, if I could begin with you, is the Gulf facing this looming labor crisis?
No, on the contrary, what the Gulf is doing is the Gulf countries are trying to create new opportunities and the reality for their citizens. And the reality is that they've been creating hundreds of thousands of jobs every year for foreigners. And the economy, the structure of the economy has allowed them to create those jobs for foreigners and at the same time create jobs for citizens. Now what's happening is that with the fall in oil prices, they need to focus the job creation on the citizens, and perhaps some of the cushy jobs that citizens could enjoy in the past are no longer available, so the citizens will have to perform some of the more mainstream jobs that foreigners were able to get. But it's not a crisis, on the contrary. It's more like the GCC economies are starting to look like normal economies or heading in that path.
Okay, Bernard Hakel, is it easier said than done?
I think it is, actually. First of all, you have to disaggregate the labor market. Most of the foreigners are menial workers, either, construction workers or janitors or T-boys, that sort of thing. Servants, also household servants. I think their wages are so low that it would be extremely difficult to get Saudis or GCC nationals to perform that kind of work. But, at the higher end of the market, then I think it is possible to create jobs. Certainly the public sector is bloated in terms of employment. Saudi Arabia, for instance, has about 2/3 of the working population, Saudi working population, works for the public sector. That has to be addressed pretty dramatically. And jobs have to be created in the private sector. That's difficult, though, to do.
Okay, so Omar, to take one of those points and throw it back at you, are you telling me that in the foreseeable future, you can foresee Saudis and Kuwaitis and Qataris doing those menial jobs, being construction workers, being janitors, and so on, without a fundamental shift in the society and without any trouble?
Well, first of all, I'd say that those menial jobs, while they represent the majority, nationals, with the exception of Saudi Arabia, also represent a minority of the labor force. So you don't actually have to have nationals performing those jobs yet. There's still, even if it's a minority of foreign jobs, it's still a large number of jobs that are being performed by, in absolute terms and relative to the citizens, that are available for citizens to perform. But in terms of the cultural change you're describing that is necessary, I agree that there's a cultural change necessary, but I would point two things out. First of all, historically, people from the GCC have lived in the toughest climate in the entire world. It's even tougher than a tundra climate. The desert climate of the GCC means the actual job of a GCC citizen 100 years ago was pretty much as hard a job as any job you could get anywhere in the world. For example, the pearl diving that many performed in the GCC. And so the history, it is part of the GCC culture to perform tough jobs. And it's only in the last 30 years where they've had the opportunity to do something more cushy. But just as they gained the ability, just as they got used to doing cushy jobs, they can quickly go back to their roots of performing tough jobs. And secondly, this is something I've seen before my very eyes.
Right? Once you're used to a certain standard of living, and I know where you are in Bahrain, it's a little bit different because, from my own personal experience, anecdotally and so on, Bahrain has a more inclusive workforce, right? But you don't really see that sort of thing in a place like Qatar or elsewhere. But are you telling me there's going to be this kind of seamless trend?
Even in Saudi Arabia, so if you go to the Eastern Province, 10 years ago, you would not have found Saudi Arabian citizens working in shopping malls, working in fast food restaurants. Now you do. That's just 10 years. I think the reality is that when the economic forces push people in that direction, people moan, people grumble.
Right.
But just like any citizen anywhere in the world, they'll take what's on offer.
Okay, so Bernard Haeckel, possibilities, the prospects of taxation, needing people to do, so-called real jobs, bringing more women into the workplace in a place like Saudi Arabia as they try, to not be so reliant on the oil economy. Tell me how you foresee the political and cultural changes playing out there.
Well, I think that the Saudi leadership is coming to the realization that if they really want to decouple their economy from oil and oil rents, this dependence on oil revenues, they have to allow more and more women who, after all, in the Saudi case, are the better educated, the more highly motivated, the more disciplined, a group in society. And so what we're seeing is a move towards greater female employment out of economic and necessity reform of the economy, rather than some commitment to feminism. I think this is a very good sign, actually, because with more women in the workforce, you'll have more income in families, and that will be a boost to the economy. So my sense is that there is going to be a difficulty culturally, politically, in getting people to work in the private sector as opposed to cushy jobs in the public sector, but that this will have to be done.
Okay, so Omar, is the age done now? Is it over for the kind of high-ranking expats, the doctors and the lawyers and the consultants and so on?
Yeah, I still think all these actually, I'm more optimistic because the GCC countries are going to start, because they're going to restructure their economies in the right way, they're going to start growing more and growing in the way that a regular advanced economy should be growing. And that's going to create many job opportunities. And in any developed economy, the jobs, especially the high-skilled jobs by foreigners, are complementary to those of citizens. So just like in the US, the UK, France, all the advanced economies, you see many foreigners working in high-end positions. You'll continue to see that, and you may even see, I think, more, especially in the sectors in which the GCC wants to head. Perhaps, as Bernard pointed out, in petrochemicals, which is a mature sector, it's become almost completely nationals. But all the new other sectors which the GCC countries want to expand in, they will look for external expertise, just like any other country does. And I still think that there are fertile grounds for foreigners side by side with citizens.
I want to bring to your attention something that came from a Ghanaian embassy. The Ghanaian embassy issuing this kind of warning to its citizens, saying it wishes to caution Ghanaian youth living in Ghana, especially the ladies who have made plans or are thinking of traveling to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and the other Gulf Cooperation Council countries for so-called greener pastures, to be extremely mindful of the unfavorable working conditions for foreign unskilled workers, such as housemaids and other laborers. Omar, this is interesting because if I compare to, say, 10 years ago, when I would speak to Nigerians, Ghanaians, and others in a place like Qatar, even Nepalese who hadn't been paid for many months, they would complain to their embassy, and the embassy would say, hold on, we can't really do much about it because they were so reliant on these remittances. But that's sort of changing now because you actually see the government saying, don't go to the Gulf. Tell me what's going on there. Tell me why there's been such a major change from these countries.
Well, I would say that, while I can't speak for all the countries, but I would say that in many of the countries, for example, Ghana, these are countries that have been growing and developing, and so their need to export labor as a source of income is diminishing. If you take the example of India, India has been developing significantly over the past 20 or 30 years, and whereas Indians were always looking for any job opportunities outside India, now they have many excellent job opportunities at home. So it's just a sign of a reflection of the organic development that's happening in many developing countries, and this is a good sign for the world economy and a good sign for global prosperity.
Bernard Haeckel, organic development or the fact that conditions are just so bad, especially now that there's this shift, and that they might not need these laborers that much in the Gulf, that they're treating them extra bad?
I don't see any indication of this. I mean, look, there are always going to be cases of servants being badly treated, in homes, and we know of some notorious cases. I think of an Indonesian woman in one case, an Indian woman in another. But that's a cautionary tale, and it's a risk that I think many laborers, especially those who work inside the household, take. Now, having said that, I mean, I think it's very good that these governments, whether it's India or Indonesia or Ghana, are being more proactive, being more protective of their citizens who are working in the Gulf. And I also see that the Gulf countries themselves, partly because of social media and because of the scandals that social media can generate on a very wide and global scale, are also being more responsive to abuses such as the ones that I just mentioned.
Okay, gentlemen, I think that's a good point at which to wrap the discussion. Thanks so much for a deeper analysis of what's actually going on in the Gulf right now in terms of laborers and the economy. It's been good to talk to both of you, Bernard Haeckel and Omar Al-Ubaidli. Thanks again.